we're friends as well. People think that Bugatti haters, but
no, as we said, never ever.
We're part of the Bugatti family. Look, I've even got myself a hat. And so has everybody else. And but no, it's been amazing coming over here.
It was great to have you there, guys.
No, thank you for hosting us and like taking us in with open arms now, because we're going to be at Morsan soon.
Yeah, happy to welcome you there in 1 month more or less.
Exactly.
More than that, so.
No, well, in 1 month in September we'll be there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you for coming. Thank you, guys.
I think you've got a question for Alexis before we go though.
Oh. Yeah, about this windscreen. We'll have to talk about this windscreen we need for the Chiron behind the camera.
Is Bugatti inviting Matt Armstrong to Molsheim because they respect what he built, or because the internet forced their hand? After 9 months of public tension, the answer says a lot about how supercar brands are learning to survive the creator economy. Let's rewind to where this all started, because the invitation only makes sense once you understand the war that came before it. In October last year, Matt Armstrong took on a Bugatti Chiron per sport that had been declared a total loss. The car belonged to Miami influencer Alex Gonzalez, and it had been through a brutal accident. The front end was crushed, the airbags had fired, and the transmission was badly damaged. Bugatti looked at the wreck and quoted about $1.7 million for an official repair. When the owner refused that number, Bugatti did something that automotive fans rarely see from a manufacturer. The company locked the car's VIN, effectively refusing to sell parts or support any repair done outside its own authorized network. That single decision turned a private insurance claim into a public standoff that would run for the better part of a year. Why would Bugatti go that far over one car out of only 60 ever built? On the surface, the company said this was about safety. A Chiron is not a normal car. It uses a carbon monocoque, an 8-liter quad turbo W16, and tolerances that most independent shops simply cannot replicate. Bugatti's argument was that fixing this car outside Molsheim risks someone's life down the line, and that concern deserves acknowledgement rather than dismissal. But there was also a business logic sitting underneath the safety talk. Bugatti sells exclusivity as much as it sells horsepower. If a viral mechanic can rebuild a written-off hypercar in a home workshop using sourced parts and custom fabrication, that undercuts the mystique the brand has spent decades building around its factory, being the only place capable of this kind of work. Blacklisting the VIN protected more than just safety. It protected the myth, and myths are worth more to a brand like this than most people realize. So Armstrong did what he always does. He got to work anyway, documenting every setback for an audience that clearly wanted to see whether he could pull it off. Bugatti CEO Rimac started publicly addressing the saga on social media, at one point disputing claims that Armstrong had used 3D printed parts and insisting that leaked repair costs circulating online were inflated. This was no longer a niche restoration story tucked away on a car channel. It had become a genuine standoff between a billion-dollar hypercar brand and a mechanic with a wrench and a camera, and the automotive press could not stop covering it. Here is where the story escalates rather than settles. Rather than staying silent, Rimac kept engaging and eventually softened his stance in a way few expected. Bugatti lifted the parts blacklist and reduced its repair estimate on the Chiron. That was the first real crack in the wall, a genuine concession rather than another statement. Then Armstrong pushed the story further on his own terms. He also owned a written-off Bugatti Veyron, and once that car was drivable again, he decided to drive it straight to France as a kind of victory lap. On the way, he tried to stop at the Molsheim factory itself. It happened to be Bastille Day, a national holiday, and the building was completely empty. He filmed the moment, an empty parking lot outside one of the most famous car factories on Earth, and posted it for millions to see. A few days later, Bugatti called him directly. A company representative explained they had missed him because of the holiday, and then invited Armstrong and his team back for a proper factory visit in September. Now here is the real question this video needs to answer. Is this a peace deal, or is this damage control dressed up as hospitality? Look closely at the timing, because timing rarely lies in stories like this. This invitation did not appear out of pure goodwill in a vacuum. It appeared after Armstrong had already proven, on camera, in front of millions of viewers, that a written-off Chiron and a written-off Veyron could both be brought back to life without Bugatti's official blessing. Every mile that Veyron drove toward France was free advertising for the idea that Bugatti's gatekeeping was more about control than genuine necessity. When Rimac's own factory tours near Zagreb opened to the public days after the Chiron rebuild went viral, fans immediately flooded the comments tagging Armstrong, joking that he would show up and leave with half a Bugatti in his backpack. That reaction is not a coincidence. That is a brand watching its own narrative slip out of its hands and moving quickly to reclaim it before someone else writes the ending for them. There is a version of this story where Bugatti genuinely respects what Armstrong pulled off. Rimac himself has admitted to watching the project unfold in real time. And there is something admirable about a company acknowledging that a determined, independent mechanic exposed real gaps in its own after-sales process. Bugatti did not have to lower its repair quotes. It did not have to lift the VIN block. Those are not cheap symbolic gestures. They are financial and legal concessions that cost the company real money and set a precedent for future disputes. If this were pure PR theater with nothing behind it, the easier and cheaper move would have been continued silence. But there is also a harder truth sitting right next to that generosity. Bugatti did not invite Armstrong when he first asked for help back in October. It invited him only after the story had already gone viral against them, after the empty factory clip had racked up views showing the brand looking distant and unreachable, while a fan drove hundreds of miles just to see it. In the attention economy, an invitation that arrives after the internet has already picked a side is not generosity in its purest form. It is timing, and timing this convenient tends to be strategic rather than spontaneous. So what happens when Armstrong actually walks through the doors in Molsheim this September? This is where the stakes get genuinely interesting for anyone watching how legacy brands handle creator culture. If Bugatti treats this as a real reset, showing him the production line honestly, addressing the parts pricing controversy without spin, and maybe even helping finish the Chiron properly, this becomes a rare example of a heritage manufacturer adapting to independent creators instead of fighting them. That would be a smart, forward-thinking move, because Armstrong's audience of hands-on enthusiasts is exactly the demographic hypercar brands struggle to reach through traditional glossy marketing campaigns. If instead this turns into a stage-managed tour with no real acknowledgement of what went wrong, expect the backlash to be louder than the original controversy ever was. Armstrong's audience trusts him precisely because he shows the ugly parts of these rebuilds: the stripped bolts, the sourced Audi airbags, the improvised radiators built from scratch. If Bugatti tries to turn his visit into a glossy marketing moment with no substance behind it, his own viewers will call it out within minutes of the upload going live, and that backlash would be far harder for the brand to control than the original blacklist ever was. Either way, this moment matters well beyond one YouTuber and one car company. It is a preview of how heritage brands will have to deal with independent creators who can rebuild, review, and sometimes reverse engineer their most exclusive products in full public view, whether the manufacturer approves or not. Bugatti spent 9 months trying to control the narrative through silence and blacklists. It did not work. Now the company is trying control through access instead. Whether that access comes wrapped in honesty or just better lighting and a curated camera route is the only question left to answer, and Armstrong's camera will be rolling the entire time to find out. Matt Armstrong's Molsheim visit is happening because a rebuild the internet was not supposed to see turned into one it could not ignore. Whether this becomes an honest reset or a carefully managed photo opportunity will play out on camera, and you can be sure Armstrong will show every second of it. Subscribe for the follow-up the moment those factory doors actually open.